Hey, it's Marcel. Imagine how awesome it would be if this year, 2023, your employees were more engaged and into their work. They made better decisions, collaborated without any of those people issues, and just performed at a high level to produce great work. As leaders, we know that these attributes eliminate countless headaches and help scale the business. But quite shockingly, we often see the exact opposite behaviors take place in our teams. So we developed a hybrid leadership course to help emerging leaders bring out the best in their people. So together with your management team, we're going to help you identify the leadership skills that will result in high performance in yourself and in your employees. We're going to identify what it takes to inspire, motivate, and engage human beings to do their best work. We're going to teach you the leadership habits that will attract A players to come work for your organization. You're going to learn how to overcome the number one obstacle to clear communication. And you'll discover your personality strengths and blind spots and how to overcome those blind spots to help improve your work relationships. If you want to learn more about this unique leadership course, visit my website, marcelschwantes.com, and click on training.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, welcome to the show, coming to you from the home studio in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Glad you took the time to join us today. From wherever you're listening or watching, thank you for spending the time with us. And hey, if you like what you hear, spread the love by sharing this episode with a friend. And of course, we would be eternally grateful if you could leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast. I bring a lot of guests on the show to talk about the tenets of care in the workplace, right? Leading with more care, creating a company culture of care. More books are coming out now talking about, even the science of compassion and kindness and empathy. I bring these people on the show because we need a lot of convincing for people that still lead through toxic management and, top-down command and control environments. So that's why we do this. Now, those are all things that point to our true north here on the show, and that is we believe in the power of love as a business value, practical and actionable love that creates loyalty and commitment in others, love that elevates the human spirit to, go above and beyond. But not everybody likes to call it love, right? We've talked about this in previous episodes, but we don't have a problem with that because we know what it means. We're not afraid of using the word love in a business context because we know that it works. So when I run across thought leaders and executives, authors who unabashedly, without any concern or shame or embarrassment, publish books or speak openly to the public about love as a business strategy, I can't get them on the show fast enough. I just said love as a business strategy. Okay, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the actual title of a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. Now, if you haven't read it yet, go pick it up. For those of you watching on YouTube, there it is right there. Okay. The full title of this book is Love as a Business Strategy, Resilience, Belonging, and Success. It's co-written by 4 executives from Softway, a business that offers experiences, services, and technology products to help build resilient, inclusive, and high-performing companies. So let's flash back to 2015, when a toxic culture almost bankrupted Softway. Their leadership team, the very people that actually wrote this book, Mohammad Anwar, the CEO, Chris Petrie, a VP, Frank Dana, and Jeff Ma, both directors, They vowed to bring humanity back to the workplace. So through trial and error and determination, these guys rebuilt Softway around their greatest asset, people. And since they have a story to tell the world of how love turned their business around, Softway now helps thousands of leaders all over the world transform their businesses by putting love to work. And I'm honored that the CEO of Softway, Mohammad Anwar, agreed to come to the show. He now joins us. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, Mohammad.
Thank you for having me, Marcel. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, it's been a long time coming. I can't believe that I was telling you offline that can't believe that the book didn't come across my desk earlier, but I'm so glad that we are finally here having this conversation.
Yes.
So we always ask our guests to tell us their story. But your story is the book in itself, and the whole turnaround story of Softway. Is your story, but perhaps you can share a little bit about your background and how you have arrived where you are. So what's your story?
Sure. So thank you for having me on the show. As you mentioned, my name is Mohammad Anwar. I'm the president and CEO of Softway. This is a technology firm, technology services and digital transformation firm. I started 20 years ago when I was 20 years old in pursuing my computer science degree at the University of Houston. And within 10 years of running the business, I believed I had hit the pinnacle of success. We had over 300 employees between the US offices and Bangalore, India offices. And I was driving my fancy cars and flying planes across Texas. And I really believed I was living the American dream, especially because I'm an immigrant to this country. I moved here when I was 14. And, I was living it. And all of a sudden in 2015, 2016, things weren't working. Our company was on the verge of bankruptcy. We were hemorrhaging cash and we were losing employees left and right. And in a deep moment of introspection, I realized that this wasn't the market conditions. This wasn't our customers. This wasn't our team. This is actually my fault. I was incredibly selfish. I was greedy. And as a result of my behaviors, I had created an environment that was, based on fear and toxicity. And I almost drove the company down to the ground. But fortunately, that realization came to me just in the nick of time, where I was able to turn around the company. But before I could do that, just let me share with you how I used to behave. I would walk the hallways and the hallways would grow quiet. I would converse with certain folks and some of those folks quit after conversing with me. I would call our India offices and the phones would keep ringing. And this is back in, the 2000s and VIP systems were just new at the time. And I used to contact my IT department and tell them like, hey, you need to fix the systems because it's not working. Only recently, a few of the employees who are still here with us shared with me, Mohammed, the phones work perfectly fine. We just didn't want to pick up your call because you would yell at us, belittle us, humiliate us, and we just didn't want to face the wrath of you. So that's why we didn't answer your phone. The VIP system works perfectly. And, to take it further, I just didn't behave this way in my interactions over the phone or in person. I also managed to document my misbehaviors. And there's the infamous refrigerator email that's in the book. But in context, I came to the office one day. I tried to go put my lunch in the refrigerator and I got upset that it was not clean. And I decided to write a nastygram email to my entire company about how the refrigerator is not a right, it's a privilege. And then I'm going to take it away because you all are lazy and you don't know how to take care of the refrigerator, question their home training, told them not to use the refrigerator as their science experiment lab. You get the context of this.
So more belittling, yeah, right.
Yes. And it's in caps lock all over. I also managed to spell refrigerator the wrong way, apparently. And the next thing you know, I found out later that email had been circulated to ex-employees, and that became a laughing stock. It also made it to Glassdoor. It's there right now.
Wow.
And I managed to do this not just, in writing, in person or through telephone, in writing and chat, and like pretty much I was doing it in all possible ways and all channels of communication. Yeah. So that was kind of who I was and how I used to behave. And fortunately or unfortunately, before that, I ultimately reached a point where the company, in order to keep it from closing down, I had to make a very difficult decision to lay off almost 1/3 of the organization. But unfortunately, I did so in a very dehumanizing manner. And I'm still reeling from it. But after that, I pretty much lost all my confidence. I had no idea if Softway would remain open. I did not think I was the right person to be the CEO anymore. I had the lowest level of confidence in myself, and I had pretty much hit the lowest point in my life.
And Glassdoor wasn't helping either, because
Glassdoor
it kept piling on. Yeah.
Yes. And then I got tickets to go to a football game to my alma mater at University of Houston. And so I took my brother to the game, and I was really excited. I looked forward to the game because I'd been going through so much. I just needed a distraction. I just didn't want to think about work, think about life. I just wanted to go watch the game, have a good time. And I am a diehard fan of the Houston Cougars. And so I was really looking forward to this game because we were on a 9-0 streak, and we were like on a Cinderella season that year, and going to the game, and we're losing by 20 points going into the fourth quarter. And all of a sudden I found myself disappointed. I saw the stadium emptying out, and I questioned myself if I should stick around or leave with the rest of the crowd. But something inside of me told me, stay back, be there to support the team, and no matter win or lose. And I'm glad I did, because I witnessed one of the best comebacks in the history of Houston Cougar football. We ended up winning that night 35-34 with less than 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. And all of a sudden I saw myself getting excited, rejuvenated. And I started to envision Softway through the eyes of the Houston Cougar football team. And I started to envision our own fourth quarter financial comeback. And I was ready to go back on Monday and not give up. And I was ready to fight for Softway and make sure that we don't give up without a fight. So Monday rolls in. I walk into the office all pumped up, excited. And I logged onto Facebook Live to then watch rookie head coach Tom Herman talk to the press, because I had been really inspired by how he had transformed the program in just one season. And in that press conference, one of the reporters asked him, hey, what had led to the resiliency and the comeback victory that night for your team? And it's what he said that just blew my mind. He said it was love. It was the love and support that the players had for one another that led them to win that night. And he began to expand and say, hey, it's not the love you bro, love you dog kind of love. This is genuine love where you have my heart in your hand kind of love. And he began to expand and say, championship level teams are built based on the culture of love, not based on the talent. Because if you're not a player that goes on the field, not fighting for yourself, but fighting for your brothers around you, is the kind of love that is needed to win championship games. And in that moment, I'm like thinking, do I love my team? Do I care for my team the way Coach Herman is describing? And the resounding answer was no, I didn't. And so in that moment, I committed to myself to strive to become an empathetic, trusting, and vulnerable leader that puts the needs of others before myself, and create a circle of safety where people are empowered to learn, grow, make mistakes, forgive one another, and thereby create an environment of resilience and belonging. And I'm still on the journey, because the journey is a never-ending journey with no destination. It's a permanent state of transformation. So that's kind of a little bit of my story. That's what gave birth to Love as a Business Strategy.
And thank you, by the way, for sharing that. I know you've done it repeatedly over time, but hearing it here, it adds that special kind of perspective of where you came from. Now, speaking of perspective, here's a moment of devil's advocacy, if you will, okay? Because a lot of people, a lot of leaders, CEOs, bosses would hear the coach of the Cougars say that in an interview press conference. It was love, right? And he might just chalk it up as, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that may work for a football team. We're a business. We have stakeholders to meet their expectations, shareholders, whatever, customers. We have these expectations for financial performance, right? We have the numbers we need to meet, et cetera. Love, how is love going to help us get over that hump, right? So a lot of people would just dismiss that as, fuzzy wuzzy, kind of soft, whatever, mumble jumble, right? But to me, it's kind of like what strikes me as intriguing about your story is that you were what I label as a toxic boss, a toxic CEO, right? Mm. And a lot of people say that toxic CEOs that operate through the way that you were, they can't turn a corner. It's just how they operate. Some people say that they are just innately designed that way. It's in their human nature to look at business through the eyes of greed and power and control, and seeing it through the eyes of what's in it for me, what's in it for my shareholders. Forget the employees. We pay them to do work, right? But you saw something in you, something struck you differently about listening to the head coach of the Cougars talk about love. And so that's just a point of discussion. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to share, but why was it that it worked for you and it doesn't work for so many other CEOs that may have heard the same message?
I think, number one, the first reaction to the word love that us leaders in the workplace have is that it doesn't belong in the workplace.
Right.
And there's the workplace is dominated by male leaders, and men look at love as a soft word, a sign of weakness, and so forth. So it's easily, dismissed. But when I really, heard that for the first time, I was hearing it from one of the most masculine sports, arguably the most masculine sports in the world.
Sure.
And to be honest, let's face it, these sports are a business. They require high-performing teams to go out on the field and put on a show and come out with victories that sells tickets, that makes business, that makes TV ad dollars work and everything. So if you really think about it, it is a business. There's money to be made, and the coaches have money to be made, right? The players now have NIL deals to be made. And all of this stuff, at the end of the day, their performance, their victories, their wins ultimately make dollars. Mm-hmm. And if they can do it in a sports world and be, making millions through this type of performance and entertainment or sportsmanship, I think it's a very easy lesson to translate into the workplace. If you really think about it, we're a group of people that come together to achieve a goal or win or, achieve results just like sports teams.
Yeah.
So it's very translatable. And if you look at the coach in that moment and space, he or she is basically the CEO of that organization. And so it's very translatable. And when you think about love as a soft word or a soft skill, you just watch some of these coaches give it out to their teams and how they practice tough love and how they have those hard conversations, how they pull them out and make them sit down if they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And when I saw all of that, I was like, man, that when you have that kind of a relationship with your team and you're able to have those hard, tough conversations and hold people accountable, and the teammates can hold each other accountable and achieve those results like the way they do, man, imagine if we could do it in the workplace. Imagine if I could do that with our teammates. Give feedback in the moment, right? And like if you don't show up to practice, you're not allowed in. And if you don't want to belong here, enter the transfer portal. So when I really look at all of those environments and see its applicability to the workplace, I'm like, this is what we really need. We need this in the workplace. It's not about It's not about like, oh, we're a family. No, we are a team. We're here to achieve a goal. We love one another. We respect one another. We care for one another. But if you're not in it, enter the transfer portal. Absolutely fine. And we'll help you find another place where they will embrace you. But if you're going to be here and we love one another and we know the purpose and the impact we're looking to make, then we're going to hold each other accountable through empathy. We're going to hold each other accountable through that care and compassion, and tough love.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, and how successful these teams are, and they're making money in the process, it's easily translatable to the business world.
Yeah, and it has to make business sense, right? I mean, and people are intrigued by the fact that we have a podcast that talks about love consistently, but it is a business podcast. By the way, I am a sports nut. I don't know if you are, but obviously you're a football fan. I'm a football fan as well. It's intriguing. This just popped into my head. The first head coach that tell me if you know this. The first head coach that actually used the word love was probably one of the most historic legends of the NFL. It's Vince Lombardi.
Yes.
And I don't have the exact quote. I wish I knew exactly because I could quote him, but he's the one that actually and this is the 1960s, right? I mean, unheard of. And Vince Lombardi actually talked about the strength of the team. It comes from us loving one another. And this is the guy that said, winning is everything, right? And he racked up championships with the Green Bay Packers in the 60s. And he's talking about love back then.
True, totally. And even if you see like we're amidst the NCAA March Madness and look at all of these seed 15, seed 9 teams all of a sudden winning, going to Sweet 16, every single one of those interviews from the Kansas State coach to the Florida Atlantic University coach, they're like, this team loves one another. We love one another. It's what gets us through this. It's what's getting us to victories. I mean, it's a very commonly practiced behavior in action that is demonstrated with success in moments like these. And it's demonstrated multiple times over and over in the sports world.
Right. All right. So bring us back to, okay, so you experienced the shift, the light bulb goes on, but not everybody bought into where you were taking the company, right? So relive for us the moment where people left after they realized Mohammad is serious about this.
Yeah. So first thing first, a day after the press conference, I had the opportunity to gather the entire company in a town hall meeting. And, this is approximately 2.5 weeks after layoffs. So I gathered the company and everybody's like really nervous and scared because they're thinking, oh, here's another round of layoffs or something, right? And in that moment, I basically decided to tell everybody, hey, I love you all. And everybody looked at me with their eyes wide open and they're like, what is wrong with Mohammad? Is he gone crazy or what? And in that moment, I obviously was so like impassioned by the speech from Tom Herman and the victory that weekend that I was so committed that I'm going to go on this journey that I decided to declare to everybody, I love you all. But the reality was I hadn't really walked the talk. And so I needed to get feedback from some of the folks saying, hey, you know what you just said? That was really weird. That was crazy. You're the same person who just a couple of weeks ago laid off people and you're going to come tell us you love us all? Like, you're crazy. And so in that moment, I realized I needed to not say that ever again until I could demonstrate it in action.
Sure.
And so for about 1.5 years, I needed to practice to walk the talk before I could talk the walk. And it meant I had to work on my behaviors. I had to show up differently to the meetings. I had to really genuinely demonstrate that I care for the team in ways that they never expected. And it wasn't something I was bragging about. It wasn't something people knew I was doing. I was just doing it. And it took me about 1.5 years to even show up to our India offices, and I had made changes. I had changed policies. I had worked on my behaviors a lot. And, I'm feeling pretty confident. And in the town hall meeting in the India office with about 100 plus employees, I asked them if trust had improved between them and I, and only 2 people out of 100 plus people raised their hand.
That's
And
a wake-up call.
Oh man, let me tell you, I felt like somebody had just punched me in my gut. I was embarrassed. I was angry. I was humiliated. I was just so overwhelmed with all kinds of feelings that I couldn't stand there any longer. I had to prematurely leave that town hall meeting. And I was just so embarrassed. And a couple of days went by. I took a lot of time to think through everything, going through our wild emotions.
Yeah.
And about 2 days later, I had the opportunity to come back to the team and address the company again. And this time I decided to muster up the courage and I apologized. And I apologized for all of my past behaviors that I hurt the employees. I apologized for all of the policies I had instituted that I had hurt them and their families. And as I began to seek forgiveness, I began to cry. And I cry a lot, by the way. Something you learn about me. But I was overwhelmed by emotion again. So I had to leave that meeting as well prematurely. And then the last day of the trip came by, and it was the day that I was heading back to Houston. So they had gathered a farewell gathering for the US visitors. And I showed up to the gathering, and in this gathering, they gifted me a book that said, "We love you and we trust you, Mo." And they filled up the book with messages of love, support, and encouragement. And as I began to read that book, I began to cry again. But this time there were tears of joy. And I basically was very ecstatic. It was like a validation that all of the work I had been doing on myself the last year and a half is finally resulting in people embracing it and appreciating. And they used the word, "We love you and we trust you, Mo." And it was such a moment I'll never forget. But I also learned a very valuable lesson that day, that I had tried to change my behaviors. I had tried to change policies. I had tried to change all of these things. But one thing I had not done was apologize. And without that seeking of forgiveness and being forgiven, there was no way that the company would embrace the culture of love, because that was what was coming in the way of them embracing the culture of love, was me not just practicing it and declaring it, but I had never sought forgiveness. I had never asked for forgiveness. And so, yeah, that was the day that our company then committed and decided together that we're going to go on this journey of culture of love. And then I was able to push and hold our other leaders accountable for practicing those behaviors and demonstrating those behaviors. And as a result of that, some of our leaders, some of our team members said, "This is not us. This is not what we're going to do." And so I had to let them enter the transfer portal. Of course, I did it with grace. I did it with dignity, but I had to say, "Hey, if you're not in this, then we can't have you here. I'm sure there's another team that will embrace you." So we had to part ways.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to forgiveness in a minute here, but you've mentioned working on your behavior. The word behavior keeps coming up. Now, we've all heard the expression, "culture eats strategy for breakfast," right? But you go a step further and you say behavior eats culture for lunch. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So, when we were committed to go on this journey, I realized that our culture was toxic and I wanted to change culture. So I went on this Silicon Valley trip because, at that moment in time, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Ubers were getting all of this like glowing reviews and feedback about, "Oh my gosh, these places are amazing. The culture is amazing." So I wanted to go check it out because I'm like, hey, if I have to change my culture, I need to be inspired. So I visited 4 of these headquarters in one day. And as a result of watching going there, I saw amazing environment, free food, gymnasiums, yoga, printing presses, ice cream parlors, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I come out and I'm all depressed because I'm like, I can't do any of that. I'm broke. None of this is like, we just can't do this. Like, I don't know what to do anymore. But fortunately, again, going through the journey a little bit, we realized later that those are all just perks and benefits. That's not culture. That's just perks and benefits. Those are actually things companies might put across just to keep people hostage, or or put golden handcuffs on them so they don't quit. And because at the end of the day, you might be getting treated like crap. You might be getting yelled at. You might have coworkers who mistreat you, your bosses who mistreat you. But you look at all the perks and benefits, they're just temporary golden handcuffs on your wrists to say, hey, I guess I'll put up with all of this for the sake of these perks and benefits.
Right.
And the reality of culture is nothing but the emotional environment of how we feel with one another, of how we treat one another, how we behave with one another. And that is ultimately what defines culture. It's this force and this feeling that can't be described entirely, but it can be felt.
Yeah.
And that feeling doesn't come necessarily from these perks and benefits. It comes from how you feel around each other. And once we had that realization, we started to realize if we needed to change our culture, we didn't need to bring in all these ping pong tables and, all these perks and benefits. I mean, those are good to have, and we did invest in some, but we realized that it all came down to behaviors. And for me personally, I had to work on my behaviors and how I treated one another around me. And culture is nothing but the culmination of how everyone treats one another. And so if you want to change culture, we have to first change our behaviors. That's where the correlation came about.
Yeah, I love it. I have an interesting story to relate to this. I was once spearheading talent management back in my HR days for a very toxic company that had one of their values was fun, and how they exhibited that value. Speaking of perks, is that every quarter they would have and this is pre-COVID, so everybody's in the office back then, and so how they celebrated that value of quote fun was to have a company-wide Nerf gun battle. Right?
Oh wow!
So they would shut down early, 3:00. And everybody would pull out their Nerf guns. Was it a blast? Absolutely. Running around the office, shooting people with Nerf guns. Yeah, it was a blast. The problem is that this company had 60% turnover.
Oh, wow.
Because for the very reasons that you mentioned, it was not a culture of belonging. There was no psychological safety. Nobody could trust the other person as far as they could throw them. Mm-hmm. Right. So on Friday, we'd have this great Nerf gun battle. And then on Monday morning, things were exactly the same as they were before. People aren't looking each other in the eye. Collaboration is in the tank. And, and I'm the HR guy that is doing, 2 or 3 more exit interviews that week.
Oh, wow.
So to your point, it has to be, we have to be able to feel that we belong and are connected to one another. And you just embodied that as a CEO. And I am a firm believer that culture starts at the top. And it has to be modeled by the executive team, by the CEO, by the founder.
Agreed. Totally aligned to that.
All right, let's talk about the pillars. I'm so curious. Okay, that define the Softway culture.
So first step, context, like we didn't really, this is all a trial and experiment, right? Like I don't have a true definition of how to practice this in the workplace. So after 3 years of going on this journey, our company, transformed, and we went from surviving to thriving. And then we looked back retrospectively and we said, hey, what was it that had led us to, the turnaround and the success in the company? And that's when we built our framework, which is in the book. And part of the framework is we have the 6 pillars of culture of love. And we realized that the secret sauce was that these 6 behaviors were exhibited by everyone in the corporation, in our company, which was inclusion, empathy, vulnerability, trust, empowerment, and forgiveness. And these behaviors had to be experienced by everyone in the organization. And And it's not like one is more important than the other, or one is more prioritized than the other. In fact, these are extremely interdependent on each other. They're like the 6 cylinders of a car engine. They have to fire at the right instant, at the right time, in perfect harmony and synchronous manner with each other to produce maximum horsepower. Similarly, these 6 behaviors have to be experienced in that similar manner, in perfect harmony with one another, to realize high performance or high reliability teams. And so those were the 6 pillars. And I can go into defining them if you'd like, but those are kind of the 6 behaviors that.
Yeah, touch briefly. How about this? How about I pick maybe 2 or 3, and then you can kind of drill down a little deeper, because I'm very curious about the vulnerability part. Okay, because it's tough to be vulnerable in a kind of transactional business environment where it's all about the bottom line and you have to meet expectations, right? So how do you employ vulnerability as a leader without coming across as, I don't know, weak or lacking in confidence? A lot of people say, well, if you are too vulnerable, people are going to walk all over you.
Yeah. So the vulnerability, at least from the context of the workplace that we speak of and we encourage, is very simple. It's not about sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. It's just coming down to being as simple as being able to say, you know what? I messed up. I apologize. I take ownership. I screwed up. That's it. It's simple as that, right? But yet it's the hardest thing for us as humans, let alone leaders, to be able to say such things. And it requires intense amount of courage. It requires a lot of courage. It's not easy. For example, that story of me apologizing to our company for my past behaviors, it took me 1.5 years to build up the courage to even do that, to even say that. So it doesn't come naturally like overnight. It does require finding yourself, building self-awareness, recognizing who you are and feeling confident in who you are as a person by knowing your true self. And then it becomes easier to be vulnerable. And so it takes a journey. It takes time to build that kind of self-awareness to say those things. And ultimately, vulnerability is definitely not a sign of weakness, because if someone who's trying to be really vulnerable, they will attest it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. I think people have just made up this excuse that it's a sign of weakness because they don't want to do it, because they know how hard it is. But once you truly practice it, you will recognize it requires a lot of courage. So vulnerability is definitely not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of courage. And so, it starts really with leadership. And if the top leaders are able to demonstrate vulnerability, then it gives permission for the rest of the organization to know that, wait a minute, I can be wrong. I can make mistakes, because my leaders are admitting to fault, admitting to mistakes. And if they are admitting to faults and admitting to mistakes, they might be fallible just like me. They're human just like me, which means I can have the courage and permission to do the same. So it becomes very contagious. Once you can start demonstrating that kind of vulnerability, it opens up everybody else to also be vulnerable. So leaders have to set the tone. That's why I love what you said, like leaders are the ones who have to start the culture. They set the tone. They either create culture or they destroy culture, right? And so if we can, as leaders, demonstrate that vulnerability in action, which is a big form of love, then others will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I say that vulnerability, I call it being emotionally honest, because so many of us are afraid of speaking truth to power, because we're afraid of how people are going to respond. And Mohammad, like you said, this vulnerability is not, it's not, I'm going to cry on your shoulder and let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Okay. That's not vulnerability.
I mean, that's a component of vulnerability. But the vulnerability in the workplace we're talking about is what is the simple as apology.
Yeah, exactly. And admitting when you're at fault. That's one of the things that I admire so much about you, is that in your turnaround story, it's very rare for company leaders to admit fault, or for leaders who've operated the way that you did. prior to 2015 to actually admit their mistakes. I mean, that they effed up. You don't, and to me, you didn't have a problem with that. You saw the value of saying, hey, I am human. I messed up and you're going to mess up too. And that's okay. We're a culture where, we're allowed to mess up and we're going to figure out a way to solve our problems together. Right.
True.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. I said that I was going to come back to forgiveness. So,
Yes.
All right. So you talked about that event in India, right? What was the outcome of you bearing your soul and, asking for forgiveness? This is unheard of. I mean, did people quit? Or I think you mentioned a couple of people quit, or maybe to talk more about that one.
Yeah. So one of the things that my prompt was, do you trust me? And, only 2 out of 100 people had raised their hand. And to give you background, in India, we had these employment contracts that we had, which required 2 years of commitment when you join. Attrition was at the time very high. I mean, even now it's very high in the tech sector in India. And a lot of companies employ these 2-year employee contracts, where if you break the contract, you owe money to the company for training, and they justified by training fees and so on and so forth. And so I'm out here asking if they trust me when I have a piece of paper that every single employee there has signed saying they will not quit. And if they do quit, they will pay me in a check. They will write a check to quit. And I'm here being a hypocrite asking if you trust me, right? So what I had to do was not just apologize in the moment. I actually had to null and void every single contract that I had with the employees and show them that I trust them first before I can ask them to trust me. And so we tore up the contracts, null and voided all of them. And I said, from here on out, today, nobody is obligated to have this contract with us. It is null and void. And months after that, only 2 people resigned who took advantage of that termination of the contract. But even when they did resign, the way they resigned was something that was not in the book. They actually came to me and they cried and they said, I am in a desperate situation where I need to go back to my hometown to take care of my family. This is the best thing that could happen to me. You're giving me an opportunity to go take care of my parents. And so I'm having to leave you, not because I don't trust you, but because I got to take care of my family. And that is how those 2 people left. And the rest of them didn't even think about resigning.
Yeah, that speaks volumes to, basically to the fact that they did forgive you. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of forgiveness, because there's not a thought had ran through my mind as I read that part of the book that people were just going to take advantage of you and walk, where, you were going to have most of that India side of the business say, hey, yeah, I don't have to pay that. Let's go. I'm out of here. Right. But they chose to stay because they believed in you. And I think they saw the change in you. And I think that lends to the biggest pillar of all the 6 to me. If I'm thinking about what leads to the top of the mountain, right? Yes, vulnerability is great. People now know that you're not going to withhold information, that he's able to be vulnerable. Empowerment is another one of your pillars, right? Empower people to succeed and remove obstacles from their path, etc., right? Empathy, you want to listen, and you want to step into people's shoes. Inclusion, make sure they feel like they belong, etc. But to me, all those things lead to trust, which is that one pillar to me that without trust, man, I don't think any of this would be possible. The shift to a culture of love.
Yeah. And that's why I call these pillars very interdependent on each other. If you think about it, sometimes you have to empower to build trust. Sometimes you have to be vulnerable to build trust. Sometimes you have to trust to forgive. Sometimes you have to be empathetic to trust. So they're all so interdependent on each other that you can't really say one is better or a prerequisite. They actually keep changing situationally. But ultimately, I think forgiveness, if I am a little biased towards it, I think forgiveness has a little bit more weight because I think that is the foundation for allowing organizations to thrive and be successful. Because if you look at it, the lack of forgiveness in the workplaces has hindered corporations from growth. Because when people, leaders, peers hurt each other intentionally or unintentionally, we're all human. We do it all the time. And we do it in the workplace too. And we can say we're professional all day long, but at the end of the day, we're human and we feel the hurt and we hang on to that hurt. And that manifests in the way we show up in the workplace with each other, how we make decisions, who all of a sudden we decide not to invite to the meetings, who all of a sudden we don't decide to include in the projects. Is it because they really don't have the qualification, or is it because I'm holding on to unforgiveness?
Right.
And when I go into my appraisal process, am I willing to forget the mistake an employee made 5 years ago, even though it's the last year's cycle, and I still hold that up against them when time comes for raises or promotions? All of these things are stemming from unforgiveness.
Yeah.
And lack of forgiveness is the single most, probably the thing that holds companies back, that is not allowing companies to move forward, is because people are unable to forgive one another. And so I would say forgiveness has a little bit of an extra weight in there. Yeah. And I also love the saying by Mother Teresa, which is, if you must learn to love, then you must learn to forgive. And if you can't forgive, you can't love.
Yeah.
And so I think corporations need a lot of that.
You totally sold me on this, because I have seen how the lack of forgiveness lends to even teams, not just individuals, but teams that don't forgive other teams for doing so, whatever the case may be, right? They will create silos where they stop communicating with the other team, or they act passive aggressive towards the other team, right?
Yeah.
To try to sabotage, I don't know, a process or a decision, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that there is power in forgiveness. So, okay, so since you chose to go to the forgiveness as being a little more weighty, I had this in my notes to touch on. Okay, I'm going to quote from the book, because a lot of times we only think of forgiveness in a religious sense, right? I mean, from Judeo-Christian, it's all over the Bible, forgiveness. So here's how you define it. Forgiveness is the ability to look past someone's mistakes, shortcomings, or offensive actions. And here's the clincher, and continue to build a relationship, right? Oh man, that's good for me. That's good for the soul, Mohammad. That's good for the soul. But here's a devil's advocacy question. Somebody may be listening going, yeah, Marcel and Mohammad, but what if mistakes are repeated over and over and over by the same person, and now it's affecting my business? I mean, is there a line that needs to be drawn on forgiveness?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at the other pillars now. You have to look at the other pillars and say, hey, are you truly being empathetic to understand the person's situation? Are you taking the time to really invest into the person to understand why are they repeatedly making a mistake? And how are you having those honest conversations? How are you coaching them? How are you mentoring them? How are you supporting them? Because in the culture of love, you just don't let people keep failing. You help them, you guide them, you take them out of those failures by showing them how to do it successfully and do it beside them. And if you're not doing that, then yeah, it's easy to say, what do you do in those situations? I'd say you're not practicing culture of love. Yeah. So forgiveness alone is not enough. You still need to do everything else that goes with it.
Oh, I love it. Well, as we wind down here, man, I wish we had the format for a 2-hour podcast. Unfortunately, we got to bring it home. But part 3 of the book is putting it all together and actually, maybe creating the system, the structure that will result in a high-performing organization through love. So what are some key lessons there that you can drop for us? If you're a CEO listening, listen to Mohammad, because he's gone through the gamut here. So what would be some key lessons that makes business sense?
I'd say, look, as a business owner, as intelligent as we are, we'll focus on strategy a lot. And we'll focus on like the processes, the tools, the systems, and structures, and so forth. Those are all good. But if you don't start from this standpoint of behaviors and culture, none of those things will be sustainable. They're not going to last long. There'll be short-term solutions, and they will only last for a little bit. So if you really want to build sustainable strategies that lead your business to have successful outcomes and business outcomes, behaviors are the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that means as leaders, we have to build self-awareness of our own behaviors and understand how we think we are coming across versus how actually people are experiencing us. We need to reduce that gap. And when we have the right mindsets, and then when we can demonstrate the behaviors of culture of love, is when you can really create environments where you can allow your people to be their true self and bring their best ideas without fear of embarrassment, or share feedback and receive feedback. And that's when those people are responsible for creating processes or creating technology or creating tools of your strategic system. If you don't focus on that, none of the other elements of strategy are going to be successful. And we too many times in any transformation effort give very little focus to the people side. And if you look at data, 84% of digital transformations fail, not because the technology and the processes were a failure. It was because we didn't focus on the people side and the unlearning to relearn the new behaviors. And that's what leads to businesses not being successful. So if you're listening, I'd say, go think about this. How do behaviors ultimately map to every financial line item in your financial statement? There's a behavior that makes it move up or move down. That's how I would look at everything.
Wow. It's what's great is that you spoke of self-awareness. You are a classic case study in your own transformation as raising your self-awareness, right? Raising your emotional intelligence to tackle a situation gone south, almost at the brink of bankruptcy. Your self-awareness did a complete shift. And I am hoping that more and more leaders and CEOs are able to do that, to look at something from a different perspective, right? To address a blind spot, to get introspective, to get into your heart and face up to the reality of, okay, this is no longer working. What needs to change? And maybe it starts with you, the leader. You need to change. And you talk about behaviors. So, yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, we're going to bring it home.
Yes.
So we do that traditionally on the show with two questions. Mohammad, personally, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
In being able to go around the world and share the story and speak to leaders, what I'm recognizing is that all the leaders out there are human at the end of the day. And I think too much of the messaging and the information out there is targeting the leaders as the evil, as the ones responsible for today's situations. And that might be true by nature of fact. But at the end of the day, I think the best way we can change the environment and bring back humanity to the workplace has to begin with the leaders, and which means we need to practice love towards all those leaders that probably haven't gotten the support, haven't gotten the feedback, haven't received and felt the love like I did with my team. If my team hadn't been gracious with me, forgiving of me, and supported me and given me the feedback and saw me as Mohammad, the human, not Mohammad, the CEO, I don't think I would be successful in this transformation. And I'm still on it. And without the support of my team, without the support of my teammates, I'm not going to be able to even share these stories. I won't be able to do it. And so I guess what's in my heart is I really wish for those leaders out there. I feel the empathy towards them. It's very lonely at the top. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of burden on the shoulders. And I want to encourage them to lean on their teams to help them, to support them. Be vulnerable and ask for that help. Be vulnerable and share with your teams that you don't know what you don't know. And those teams will step up to help you. So that's my ask. So I feel like there's too much of like that negative energy towards leadership. And I want to encourage them that, and the rest of the world, that the same leaders need the same love that we're expecting from them towards us. We need to show love first as well. That's it.
Beautifully stated. And finally, you close us out your way with a key takeaway, a mic drop moment. I don't know, whatever you want. You got the floor. Yeah. Bring us home.
Last thing I'll share is when I was on this journey to create the culture of love, I struggled a lot at first. And a mentor of mine told me, hey, Mohammed, you're not able to love your team or love one another because you're too focused on the weaknesses of others. Look for the goodness in others and you will start to love each other. And so I will give you that feedback, key takeaway. If you want to learn to love, then look for the goodness in others while you look for the weakness in yourself, because that will make you a better human in order to keep looking for the goodness in others. And that's how you can easily build a culture of love.
There's a couple of tweets in there waiting to happen. I can't wait to get. All right. That's great. It's been awesome to hang out with you and finally connect with you. Hey, if people want to connect with you personally or find out more about Softway or find out how you guys can come into their organization and teach these principles, where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, look up our book. It's a complete playbook on how to use love as a business strategy. And you can find it on the website, loveasabusinessstrategy.com. We also have a podcast, Love as a Business Strategy podcast. You can learn from there. But if you're looking for bringing in us as speakers or come in and host our Seneca Leaders, which is a transformative experience for leaders, you can go to culture-plus.com. And Culture Plus as the t-shirt I'm wearing, but spelled on the domain name culture-plus.com. And you'll find a bunch of solutions and services that we have now started to offer as our second growth engine for Softway and offering culture as a service. So you can leverage us there. Or if you're looking for technology and communication services, you can go to softway.com. So, and me personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just look me up, Mohammad Anwar. Probably have to put a few other key phrases there like Softway and Love as a Business Strategy, but you'll find me. And I'm very active on LinkedIn and would love to connect with anybody who wants to ask me anything.
My personal wish, and I'll say this live to everybody here to hear, is to share a stage with you one day where we can actually speak on this same thing to help shift the minds of other people. So that's my one wish. I want to get on stage with you one day.
Awesome. Well, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been real. Thank you so much for joining us. You are doing amazing work, and we are so thankful for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcel, for having me and allowing me to share my story with the world.
And you can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes on my website, marcelschwantes.com. You'll find all the resources there to this episode, all of Mohammed's contact information, and a YouTube link to watch the show. And finally, hey, we're always looking for sponsors to help us spread this Love in Action movement globally. We're at 165 countries. Let's pick up a few more countries along the way. So if you're interested, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.